Hello again. My name is Sean Han, and I'm one of the event coordinator of the Chosŏn History Society, a public learning society. Welcome again to another Chosŏn History Society Zoom event today. We are delighted to have you all here. And today we have Dr. Jung Donghun as our invited speaker. Jung Donghun will talk about the history of pre-modern Korea's interaction with China that he has been working on. And I am the moderator of Jung Donghun's talk today. And while we are waiting for the last minute participants of this event to join, I want to give a little more information about the Chosån History Society before we start. Again, my name is Sean Han, and on behalf of the Chosån History Society, welcome you to join today's Zoom event. Chosån History Society, or CHS, is a public learning society fostering study, research, and teaching of Korea's past by connecting scholars working both inside and outside the professional academy. This CHS is a community based on sharing rather than competition or exclusivity. It provides opportunities for scholars who are operating independently or otherwise under-resourced to share research and generate networking resources. The CHS will also connect these scholars with one another, fostering a network for shared interests. Through talks, workshops, public lectures, and other events, the CHS will develop and host public resources for the study, research, and teaching of Korea's past. In today's Zoom meeting, we will also have other CHS team members joining today's session, including Six. Six is the program advisor and co-founder of the Chosån History Society. And I just want to give Six a chance to say hello and welcome everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to, I'm actually losing count of how many events we've had this year. So it's been going quite well and getting more and more attendance. And today we really are delighted to have Professor Chang with us. Yeah, you know, I've known Professor Chung for quite a while. When I was staying at Seoul National University for my PhD research, he was, I think maybe he already defended or was nearing defense, his defense. So I received a lot of help from him and advice. So yeah, so looking forward. I'm gonna.
Thank you so much, Six. So, and before we actually get started with today's talk, I'd like to give an introduction of Donghun. So, Jung Donghun is an assistant professor at Seoul National University of Education, and he earned his PhD from Seoul National University. He majored in pre-modern Korea-China relation, especially from 10th century to 15th century. He wrote a doctoral thesis on diplomatic documents during the Goryeo dynasty, using both diplomatic documents to trace the reality, institutions, and practices of diplomacy beyond what is written on those historical documents. Donghun was also a visiting student at the University of British Columbia at Canada, and also visiting student at University of Hawaii. And recently, he has been interested in revealing how memories and records of history are made, transmitted, and how they are misunderstood, distorted, and manipulated. Personally, Jung Donghun is also my beloved Xuande. I met Jung Donghun when I was an undergrad student at Seoul National University. Back then, I learned so much from him. And today, I'm very happy to have him here and have this opportunity to hear about his cutting edge research. So today, Donghun will share his fascinating research on unofficial channels of interstate relations that shape Sino-Korean history. His talk is titled Emperor Between the Lines, Private Channels of Imperial Desire in Early Chosŏn-Ming Relations. Donghun's talk will be about 30 minutes length, and after his talk is done, then we will have about 30 minutes of moderated Q&A session. without further ado, we'll get started. So please welcome Donghun. And I
Thank
will
you very
ask
much, Song-yeol.
Donghun, please start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Song-yeol, for introducing me kindly. I can see Dr. Edward Schultz and Don Baker. I was sitting in your classes about 10 years ago in Hawaii and the British Columbia, the UBC. Nice to meet you again. And I can see the Dr. Siniwin. How do you do? I'm very glad to meet you. And I'm a very big fan of you. And I tried to translate your book. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, this is early in the morning in Seoul, where I am. And I just dropped my kid off at a kindergarten and jumped into here, my office. So I'm gasping a little now. It's not just because I'm nervous, but because I'm really out of breath. Please pardon me. Actually, of course, I'm very nervous to prepare this presentation. I spent almost a whole week for watching TV shows in English. That's very challenging for me. By the way, I am Jung Donghun, and now I'm studying in SNUE, Seoul National University of Education. It's not SNU, it's not the SNU, but SNUE. This is a college for elementary school teachers. Once again, thank you for joining my presentation, and let me start. I will share my slides. Emperors between lines, private channels of imperial desire in early Chosŏn-Ming relations. Today, I would like to introduce several interesting behind stories of 15th century Chosŏn-Ming relations. I am majoring in diplomatic documents, but I feel the real side of diplomacy is not always written on papers. Fortunately, the annals of the Joseon dynasty, Joseon 왕조실록, contain not only the official document from Ming court, but also the informal and secret messages of the emperors. Based on this record, I will show you the two dimensions of diplomatic relations. One is public sphere, which is very familiar to the contemporary historians. The other is private one, which I am focusing on today. And I would like to, I am going to sue the Chinese historians, and I'd like to reveal a case of manipulation of Chinese historical books, which do not say any words about the private side of the diplomats and the bad face of the emperors. This is today's main character, Xuande Emperor, Zhu Jianji. We remember that he was a very good person, a good emperor. This is because the famous Qing historian Gu Yingtai says so in Mingshi Shibomu, 명사기사부말, which has very powerful influence until now. He described this era as a heyday of Ming dynasty. 인선지치, 런션지치, and praised the generous Hongxi and Xuande emperor and the wise officials surrounding them, such as three Yangs. I will blame the three Yangs today in this presentation. But the King Sejong of Joseon, who lived at the same time, called him, the Xuande emperor, a foolish, greedy ruler, again and again. Why are the evaluations so different? I think it's because the two people, Gu Yingtai and Sejong, faced the emperor's different faces and records about him. 명선종 사력도. This painting describes the emperor's hunting. This one, the Xuande emperor. The sage rulers hunting with bow and arrows, killing so cute deer is not well mentioned in history books. For a long time, historians have suggested an autocracy as a keyword to explain the Ming politics. Only the emperor was able to make a final decision on all things, and the emperor's word, shengzhi, literally means sacred will, directly became law. Then, how exactly the emperor's words were written onto papers or not written? My question starts here. Generally, the emperor's words were conveyed to the receivers in following ways. Of course, the most simple way is saying something directly to face. However, as you know, the emperor had never met the Joseon king face to face. So the simplest way is not possible at that time. Then the first is oral message. A messenger delivered the order without any paper. And the second one is a memo. Someone beside the emperor quickly write the word down and passed it to the receivers. And the third one is an official document, 자문, like this one, 자문. Yeah, that's the topic I explored in my master's thesis. Based on the emperor's word, the official document such as 자문 was made, and the document called the 성주, like this way, in what date, somewhere. I respectfully received the sacred will. In Korean, 봉천문, 흠봉성지, blah blah blah, 칭치. But in these procedures, the officials usually massage the emperor's message. They replaced the emperor's harsh remarks with more appropriate word, matured word. And the last one, and the most richer but most complicated way, is the Imperial edict. A ghostwriter who is familiar with history and literature made up beautiful sentences, which was not from the emperor's mouth. Most of the remaining documents today were written in third and fourth ways. They are written in classical and literary Chinese. But the first and second ways, oral messages, only survive when someone wrote them down as a memo. Of course, we can find few memos amongst Chinese historical records. However, the Korean books remained them a lot because they had to respond to the imperial orders. Yeah, let's take a look at this simple example. On the left side is Emperor Hongwu Zhuyanzhang's word in official document of Board of Light, 예부자문. I will read this. 예부자왈, 봉성지, 뻥성주, 전자, 공민제시, 입공사지, 지임상 탄지, 지임기 초래, 공전지 위원. Here, the red letters, 공민. 공민 is his posthumous title, which was awarded by the emperor. And 왕전 is his Chinese style name. This quoted part is very short, but we can find that this document was written in literary Chinese. But on the other hand, on the right is emperor's word, which was transferred by Korean envoy 설장수, who was originally from China. When he talked with 설장수, the emperor called King Gongmin 바얀템으로. 설장수 환자 경사 흠봉 선유성지왈. I'm not very good at Chinese, modern Chinese, but I will read this. 白天日王有时进了些号码来为我那么却是好 when 바얀템으로 왕 is the king 국민. 바얀템으로 왕, in this part, the 바얀템으로 왕有时 means when Bayantemuri king was alive. The meaning of this part is same with 공민 제시. However, this part, Bayantemuri 왕요시, is colloquial and vernacular form. The difference is that one is the literary style, and one is the colloquial style. Anyway, by the way, Bayantemuru is the King Gongmin's Mongolian style name. So the difference is that thanks to this difference of style, we can distinguish the oral message from official documents. In the history of Korea, 고려사 and 조선왕조실록, many instances of oral messages are recorded in colloquial and vernacular Chinese. Through this, we can see the true feelings of the emperor. I had very hard time to interpret exactly what Zhu Yunjiang said in Nanjing regional dialect, and I had to get help from a Chinese friend from Nanjing. He's now working in Shandong. And his mother was from the Nanjing, so when he looked at the emperor's words, he exactly explained the nuance of the Zhu Yunjiang. And sometimes the emperor was very sarcastic, so it's very difficult to accurately interpret word to the nuance. In official documents, we're familiar. Emperors issued very serious orders and remarked very generously. For example, he issued an order about the Jurchen were reducing Joseon's tribute, and they usually praised the loyal devotion of the Joseon king. The Ming and Joseon relationship painted in this document is the ideal one between the Son of Heaven and the Vessel Lord within the traditional Chinese world order. These are the beautiful and famous ceramics which were made during the Xuande reign. The emperors used to send gifts such as books or silk and ceramics to Joseon king with the official document. However, the emperor's oral messages were somewhat different. After those formal ceremonies in Gyeongbokgung Palace were over, the Ming envoy sat down with the king alone without anyone around them and began to confess the real reason why they came. He conveyed the emperor's informal message. The emperors used to demand young and beautiful girls, dancers, singers, or women who were very good at cooking Korean food, like kimchi. The emperor really liked Joseon kimchi. So they demanded the special cook. And the emperor extremely liked various kinds of animals, such as hawk and hunting dogs, or delicious food, such as salted caviar. In Korean, we call that 젓갈, and salted shellfish, even Buddhist relics. In 1409, Ming eunuch Hwang Yan delivered the Yongle emperor's oral message to Taejong as follows. 去年这去的女子们班的班马的马歪的歪都不信号. It means the girls you sent last year were not at all pretty, too fat, or bad skin. This letter ma literally means bad skin. In Korea, we call that gombo. I searched the dictionary. It means the pockmark, a kind of scars on the face, and or too short. Wang Lujin, the king should find a pretty girl and send two or at least one right now. Wow. Can you believe that the Yongle emperor, one of the Chinese history heroes, complained to Joseon king that the women are not pretty. Wow. And the emperor's most expensive hobby was hawking, hunting with hawks. Their favorite hawks were from Joseon. We call them 송골매, 해청, 송골매. And the fact, gave Sejong a headache. To capture hawks, Joseon court had to suspend taxation in Pyongan and Hamgyong areas. Once, the Xuande emperor dispatched 400 Ming soldiers to Hamgyong province directly to capture hawks. Of course, the Joseon should pay the cost. This piece, a beautiful hawk, is painted by Lee Am, 16th century Joseon painter. And not only the Ming emperors, but also the ruling class, including Joseon king, loved hawks and hawking. Of course, the Confucian officials constantly begged the king to stop hawk hunting, but the king couldn't stop, as well as the emperor. Then, why did the emperor use oral messages? I think you could probably guess. They didn't want to make a noise. If civil officials of outer court knew it, they would blame the emperor's secret life, because that was the reason why they were paid, why they exist. Once the Yongle emperor said to Taejong, the officials did not know that she had been brought here. The envoy who picked up a tribute Joseon woman, a Gongnyo, had an official letter about giving medicine in accordance with king's wish. In fact, however, the king had never requested the medicines. So the Taejong, and when he received the letter, Taejong was very surprised. I didn't ever request the medicines. And why are you coming? This envoy with the women entered the forbidden city in the dark night in order to avoid other officials' eyes. Then, who were the most appropriate people for this infamous and unorders mission? To the messengers, the emperor need to be honest about his demands and his feeling. And then the messenger had to convey the word and even the nuance exactly to the Joseon king. And they had to keep silent about their mission to others and not to be noisy to the emperor. The only word they could say to their master was yes. So the answer is eunuchs, particularly who were originally from Joseon. Let's take a look at this beautiful painting. This painting named Amusement of Ming Shanjong, Henglakdo, was painted by Shang Shi, a famous court painter in 15th century. Here we can see the emperor at the center, who had a rich beard, and he is playing two-ho in Chinese, two-ho, kind of game, throwing sticks into a barrel, and he is playing kind of golf, putting, yeah, and he's watching a kind of polo game or soccer game. And here he is watching archery, and look at this painting. The only person who have beard is the emperor, and people around them have no beard. It means they are all eunuchs. The emperor, the stage ruler, spent a lot of time playing these games with the eunuchs. These two graphs show how many eunuchs were among the envoys of Ming Dynasty. Only one in 37 missions from Beijing to Seoul by Yongle and Xuande emperor. It is 1 in 37. 1 in 37 is the missions by the Yongle emperor was a civil official. Others are all eunuchs. And of the 13 missions by the Xuande emperor, all but 2 included eunuchs. They went back and forth between Beijing and Seoul, average of 1.5 times a year for emperor's errand. These eunuchs knew domestic matters within Joseon because they were from Joseon. And internal secret of the forbidden city, they were personally very close to the emperor. Once Pang Yan said, in Yongle lanes, other people cannot, but I can say anything to the emperor. And Changsheng said, I have served the Xuande emperor closely since he was a baby until now. So if you have any question or any request, tell me with money. Therefore, they served as the emperor's errand, but sometimes became a channel for Joseon. Sometimes they were very useful for Joseon as well. Sejong once said, in the Ming court, Changsong is in charge of our country. While the Board of Light, Yebu was responsible for diplomacy officially. The eunuch solved sensitive problems behind the scene and made things smooth and peaceful. For example, Taejong and Sejong were struggling to prepare gold and silver to send them to the Ming court as a tribute. They tried to ask the emperor several times reduce it, but failed repeatedly for accidental reasons. However, thanks to the eunuch Yunbong's lobby, Sejong was able to resolve his long-cherished desire. Of course, this was not free. The eunuch demanded a huge amount of express charge, but the Joseon court gradually paid them. Yeah, this is Jung Donghun Emperor, who was famous for ascending twice because he was once captured by Oiratasen. So we usually remember him as one of the most ridiculous emperor in the history of Ming. And his reign is also well known as the era when eunuchs enjoyed their power. However, ironically, at least Sejong of Joseon did not think so at the time. When his father Xuande passed away, he was just a 7 years old kid. My kid is 4 years old, and he did not have any interest to his classmate. So, and his grandmother and 3 youngs were responsible for politics. They sent all the Xuande Emperor's collection, Joseon women, back home. The emperor's grandmother explained that she did not know they were in the Forbidden City. I think it could be possible her son, Xuande Emperor, might say nothing about them to his mother. Fortunately for Joseon, the young emperor was not interested in the people and food and the animals of Joseon, and his new friend did not have strong ties with Joseon. And all eunuchs who served as informal channels during his father's day were withdrawn from the front of the diplomacy with Joseon. During the Xuande reign, eunuch envoys visited Seoul 1.8 times per year, but only 2 missions in 14 years of Jung Donghun reign. It was reduced to 1/12. During this period, there were no oral messages or no private demands from the emperor. The 2 countries faced a cooling period. In other words, it means that Sejong had become more comfortable. Now, let's summarize. In the first third of the 15th century, there were 2 levels of diplomacy, public sphere and private level. The civil officials in the outer court dealt with public diplomacy issues, national issues such as national security, Jurchen, horse trade, or Confucian ideas. With the emperor's document, for them, Joseon was a model tributary country and sometimes a competitor in international order. On the other hand, the eunuchs of inner court handled the emperor's words and conducted diplomacy in private realm. What was important to them was women, hawks, and hounds, and food for the emperor's taste. For them, Joseon was an endless fountain of wealth. Then, which one was more important? I'm not sure, but I think I can say the diplomacy was the emperor's private business at the time. This must be the highlight of my presentation. When I was just a little boy, my mom, who is very religious one, always said, believe in people. and believe in God. But since I started studying history, I had been taught that I should doubt everything. Perhaps that's the reason why the historians are not very social. Almost all historians I know are very suspicious and they do not trust what I say. So I admire them. Dr. Sini Williams wrote a very, very interesting book. I wrote, I was very surprised. Oh, Zhu Yuanzhang is a liar. Oh, the Zheng Yuan, one of the founding father of Chinese contemporary historiography, said, do not believe any word of historians. They are always trying to fool you. So everyone, please do not trust me and my presentation today. So anyway, the section of Joseon in History of Ming, the Myeongsa Joseonjeon, introduces an interesting episode that Xuande Emperor rejected and stopped Joseon's presenting hawk and hunting dogs to him. Rejection. Oh, that's the most horrible word I know. But in this context, the Sejong must been happy. But I was shocked. He is not who I knew. He's not who I read in Sejongshillok. But so I tried to trace the source of this episode, and fortunately, I found it out. It is based on this article from Annals of Ming Shanzhong, Myeongsanjongshillok. He said, the king dispatches invoice every year and presented hawks and dogs. So the emperor bestowed the king 15 pieces of porcelain. And the kingdom has many rare creatures, but I have no desire for such a thing. So from now on, do not offer them to me. Do not offer them to me. However, the Joseon Sejongshillok record is totally apart. The Sejongshillok record is the same document. Until now, the king, dispatched invoice every year and presented hawks and dogs. So I especially bestow 15 pieces of porcelain. So far, the records are consistent. In the kingdom, there are many good hawks and large dogs. So far, the same as well. But the point is here. So immediately search them out and send them to me. 작은 물건, do not send them to me. And here, immediately send them to me. Wow. Then one or the other must be lying. Which one is? First, the Koreans, the Joseon dynasty had no motivation to lie. Perhaps my mother does not have any motivation to lie because she never had power. But the Ming did. Chinese historians as well. In fact, right after receiving this document, Sejong issued an order to his kingdom to hunt and capture hawks for the emperor. Okay, here we can see the liars. Yang Siqi at the center and the right side, Yang Long. They are 2 of 3 Yangs and Wang Zhi here. These liars were the chief editor of Annals of Ming Shanzhong. Qing historian Gu Yingtai wrote, the loyal assistance of 3 Yangs made him a sage ruler. But today, I want to say, careful manipulation of 3 Yangs described him as a sage ruler, which he wasn't. What did Xuande Emperor say about Joseon himself? In his own poem, he left a compliment for Joseon as follows. 명선종 어제집 문물의관 매 사이 is culture and clothing surpasses that of barbarians for 4 directions. And 환문 기자 유풍제 들어보니 기자의 유풍이 있다. It is a place which treasures of the lasting trace of 기자, and 후왕방래. Oh, 나왔습니다. 후왕방래. I put effort into giving a lot of gifts and receiving a little. Oh, what a lie. He did not mention a word about the beautiful Joseon women he loved, or their songs and dance, delicious food, or the wonderful hawks, hounds from Joseon. If King Sejong had read this poem, he must certainly laughed at it. Then how did Joseon want to remember? As mentioned before, Sejong blamed the emperor several times as a foolish and greedy ruler. However, the final version of record usually leaves behind only good memories. It never left such an immature mention by the king. The final article of the Sejong실록, the funeral address of the King Sejong, and it says, 세사극호. Every year he extremely served the great, and the Son of Heaven recognized the effort. The emperor graced him with very kind praise and heaped many bestowals on him. And the second to the last article is on short bibliography of King and arbitrary to the Ming court. And it quotes 9 imperial edicts from the Xuande emperor, praising Sejong for his loyal devotion in serving the great. If we look only at this, Chosŏn-Ming relations during Sejong reign would seem to leave no room for doubt that Joseon was exemplary model of tributary in the ideal Chinese world order. Okay, this is the last slide. Recently, an epitaph of Ming eunuch Changsong was excavated. He visited Joseon 7 times, and Sejong blamed him as the greediest person in the whole history, in the whole world. But the epitaph says he traveled to Joseon many times and it made the barbarian happy. So the tributary good trailed behind him. This sentence was written by Hu Ying, a famous minister of Board of Light in Xuande, Jiangtong, and Jingtai reign. He tried very hard to take the initiative in diplomacy with Joseon from Changsong, but he failed in Xuande reign. He complained that the emperor, Xuande emperor, listened only to the eunuchs. He ignored my advice. Maybe Hu Ying couldn't imagine that his simple writing would appear to the world in 600 years. Hu Ying actually did not put this sentence in his 문집, his rhetoric collection. Contemporary Chinese historian Hu Dan, who introduces this epitaph, and he quoted the text and comments. It is ridiculous. And I feel so as well. Okay, this is it. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Yeah, that was such an interesting and fun talk to hear. Thank you so much, Donghun, for presenting your well-studied research about the Ming emperor's hidden bodily deeds that was often fulfilled and quenched by the tributaries from Joseon. And now we will have a moderator's Q&A session. So we'll have about 30 minutes of question and answer time. If you have any questions about today's talk or Donghun's ongoing projects, you can raise your hand by using the icon on the bottom of the screen, or you can type down your question in the chatting box. I will organize them in order and have Donghun to answer those questions accordingly. If you want to use Korean language, that's also fine. I'll do my best to translate them into English so that audience in this room who do not know Korean could at least get a sense of what the question is. And if you look at the bottom, yeah, there's the chatting bubble there. Feel free to send any questions. You can have it sent to everyone in the Zoom, or you can send it to me privately if you want to make your questions anonymous. So feel free to send those over to me privately. I'll make sure to get those questions addressed properly.
Can I just ask the question without having to write it out?
Either way is fine.
Okay, I'm just curious because, as you know, I find the Koryo period extremely fascinating too, and your work with the Mongol emperors. Any idea if this also occurred between the Mongol emperors and the kings of Koryo? I'm assuming it did, but I'd just like to hear your confirmation.
Yeah, thank you. As we well know, the Mongol Empire had required the young eunuchs from the Goryeo dynasty and used them as eunuchs in the court. And the Ming dynasty also used the eunuchs from Joseon as well as the Vietnam during, I think the idea for using eunuchs as an envoy is from the Mongol Empire. The eunuchs is the kind of slave for the emperor personally. So they use the envoys. They use the eunuchs as an envoy, as a messenger of private message of emperor, and it was derived from the Mongol Empire. That's my idea.
I hope that answers Edward's question. Thank you. And we have Maya's question written on the chat box, so I will read it out loud. Thank you for a fascinating talk. Do the private conversation contain anything specific about Buddhist woodblock, prints, texts?
Yeah, sure, it is. The Yongle emperor asked the Hwang Moran. How can I translate Moran in English? The kind of flower for the
Peony.
Buddha. Huh?
Peony, yes.
What?
Peony.
Peony?
Yes, peony.
Puri, yeah, Puri. And the Buddhist lyrics. And 뭐지? 사리, 부처님 사리. 뭐라고 하니?
Relics.
Relics.
Yeah.
Relics.
Or sadira, yeah.
Sari, yeah, which was given from the Mongol empires to the Goryeo kings, and the Joseon dynasty kept that at the temples in whole Korean peninsula. But the King Yongle, the Emperor Yongle, desired all saris from the Joseon and the Buddhist relics and the flowers and then makes the Chosŏn court and the King Taejong very embarrassed because they are the Confucian court. So there is wow. And the real aim of the demand of the Buddhist sari is to control the whole land of Korea, the whole land of Joseon. Sean, please translate my words into the English. I can express myself. 그 부처님 사리하고 그 고려 경전들, 그러니까 몽골 시대 때 받은 그 불교 경전들을 대규모로 달라고 요구했는데 나는 그게 아마도 그걸 통해서 조선 그 곳곳에 있는 그 사찰들을 사찰하고 그 사찰들이 어떻게 운영되고 있는지 보고 조선 곳곳의 지오그래피가 어떻게 운영되고 있는지를 파악하려는 그런 실질적인 목적이 있었다라고 생각합니다.
So what I understood from Donghun's answer is that the reason why was the Mongol court or the Ming court? Mongol?
Ming court.
Ming court, yeah. Ming court demanded such the Buddhist relics, the Shakyamuni's relics or the Buddhist scripts as a measure to conduct kind of a survey of Buddhist temples that was spread around the Korean peninsula, and as a measure of kind of surveillance using those actions as a way to intervene domestic politics in Korea, in Joseon. So, so Maya, I wonder if you have a kind of following question to that. If that's the case, you can unmute yourself and ask those questions.
Thank you. Yes, the question was actually more pertaining towards the other direction, not Buddhist artifacts being brought from Joseon to Ming, but the other way around. Because if we look into Joseon period Buddhist art, we see a lot of influence coming in through Ming Dynasty woodblock prints. They had a huge impact on specific iconographic constellations. So that's why I was asking about the woodblock prints. The relics, yes, that's widely known in the art history scholarship, but I think with the woodblock prints, there is still some room to expand the existing research. But even your explanation about the relics and your entire talk was extremely enjoyable and just yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Maya. Because I'm not a specialist in the Buddhist history, so I don't have enough explanation about that. And anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for your answer, Donghun. So if we can move on, the next question is from Sarah. So Sarah, if you don't mind, you can read out loud your question, or I can do it on behalf of you. Either way is fine.
Okay, I don't think I need to read it. It's a very simple question. Thank you, first of all, for a really terrific talk. I really enjoyed it. Good stuff. And I hope you will consider sending something to the journal Ming Studies when you're ready to publish a little article on this, maybe. I think everybody would be really interested. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more from you about your sources and how you found the informal messages, where you located those.
Okay, yeah, that's a very important question. I introduced some vernacular and the colloquial sentences from, I read them from the 고려사 and 조선왕조실록. In 조선왕조실록, there are so many 선유성지, 성취, and they quoted the emperor's word, colloquial sentences. And when I did not study the Chinese, modern Chinese, I did not understand what they saying, what that means, what those means. But when I started to studying Chinese, oh, I can understand. For example, 바얀템으로 왕요시, it means when the 바얀템으로 king was alive. It's the same words with 국민제. I have studied the classical Chinese when I was in elementary school from my grandfather, and I was very familiar with that. But it's very exotic for me. I feel exotic that for me. So I traced how they were written. So I can find some interesting things that besides the emperor, there were always the writers, what the emperor says. But they say the emperor's words, they couldn't write that in natural words or the literary Chinese. So they write them down as a colloquial one and translate it or made a good sentence by the civil officials and passed them to the foreign kings or the officials like this in Jamun. But sometimes the emperor passed the memos directly to the Joseon king or the receivers. So we can find some interesting cases in Chinese officials collected 문지, yeah. And if we meet a colloquial sentences, it must be the oral message, I think.
So the next question is from Sam. So Sam, would you like to read out loud your question?
I think I already got the answer from the previous question because I was wondering which source called King Kongmin Payan Temur, but I think you just answered that question. So yeah.
Yeah, Bayan Temur Wang. It is from the Koryosa.
Oh, the Koryosa. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Uwang.
Right.
Yeah. In the Uwang reign.
Then I do have a follow-up question, since this is quite sensitive information about the Chinese. Was there any risk or was there any possibility that the Koryosa would be read by Chinese, or would that be completely impossible?
You mean the Chinese people read the Koryosa?
Yes, would there be any possibility of that?
I've never think about that, but it could be possible. It could be possible, but I didn't have any memories. I didn't have any ideas about that, because the Chinese people does not have any interest in other countries' history. They do not care.
Not quite. Sometimes, I mean, because I translated the Koryo Togyong, and then you see that they did. I mean, it differed from period to period, but sometimes there are records that they imported books from Korea as well.
Yeah,
but I'm not sure about the Koryosa.
Recently, I wrote a paper about the Koryo and the Koguryo. People usually think Koryo is originated from Koryo. And the reason why we think is the Chinese history books says so. The Koryo is from Koguryo. But I recently found that the Koguryo is Koryo and Koguryo is not same one, as we know. But why the Chinese historians says so? Because they did not know that. And the 설거정, the 구호대사, and the 구양수, 신호대사, they said that because they did not know that. A very simple mistake make a big misunderstanding until now. Yeah, that's.
So what did it come from then?
In 927, when the Goryeo dynasty was built, they dispatched an envoy to the Huliang of 5 dynasties. At that time, the Huliang was collapsed and the records were all burnt out. So they did not know that. Maybe the Goryeo dynasty introduced themselves as a new dynasty, but after the record was burnt out, the Chinese historians and Chinese officials, when they first met the Goryeo dynasty's document, hey, what is Goryeo? And someone said, Goryeo? Maybe it was the Koguryo, because the Koguryo was called Goryeo after 5th century. So that words were written down in famous history books, and the historians after them always quoted the same words again and again. Koguryo is from Goryeo. Goryeo is from Koguryo. And until now, we remember Goryeo as a successor of Koguryo. Yeah, I don't think so.
That's a very fascinating answer. I just got some memos from the chat box. Rob mentioning that Koryosa comes from 1451, not Goryeo, so hard to read it until after at least Sejong. And Six also mentioned that Suku Chanshu project during the Qing period lists Koryosa. So there's a kind of evidence that Koryosa was also transmitted to China, but as a 2-volume nakbon. Yeah. So janbon. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, maybe not the entire one, but as a kind of scrap that does not may not include the old information. But I think this is a kind of fascinating way to understand how uneven the information about Korea, Joseon, or Korea as a whole was so uneven in among Chinese intellectuals or among the officials. And maybe we can move on to the next question from King Kwang Mong. So King Kwang Mong, are you there? If you please, could you read out loud your question, or I can read it.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for your interesting talk. I'm particularly interested in the use of colloquial languages in diplomatic exchanges. So during the Mongol period, especially during the Mongol invasion, Mongol Khans also sent edicts to Koryo with heavy colloquial language. So my question is, was there any connections between the Mongol Yuan and Ming?
Yeah, thank you for an interesting question. At the first period of the Mongol dynasty, Mongol Empire, they did not know how to exactly write the word to the literary Chinese. So we can read the colloquial, very harsh colloquial edicts from the Goryeo. But after that, after Kublai Khan ascended, they hired the Chinese intellects to translate their words to the Chinese, and some interpreters into their inner court. So we can only find some colloquial edicts in Goryeo after Kublai Khan. When the Kublai Khan or the other Khans met the Goryeo kings, they said in Mongolian words. So there were two interpreters and two translators with them. One is write them down in Mongolian words with the Uyghurian letter, and the other one wrote them down as a Chinese characters with the Korean style, the Chinese, the classical Chinese. So we can read the two styles on the Goryeo at the same time. But when I say Songnyeol, when I say with Songnyeol, we use Korean and English. And if we say something in Korean, they wrote them down in classical Chinese. But when you say something in English words, in English, they wrote them down as colloquial Chinese. Yeah, we can distinguish them.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next question is from Chelsea.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Dr. Jung, for a really interesting talk. And I have maybe a factual clarification and then maybe a bigger interpretive question. So the factual part is, based on your talk and also your abstract, my understanding is that not only was it the Zhentong Emperor, but also the later Ming emperors, they did not generally go ask for women and curiosities anymore, ever since it was stopped at Zhentong. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, so I guess then the follow-up is, so I studied the later Ming dynasty, so it gets me thinking, so why is it that this is concentrated in the early Ming, right? It seems like, at least maybe, from my impression of the later Ming emperors, they are not as powerful vis-a-vis the civil officials. So it seems like, if they were to order that we are going to invade Korea, maybe the officials are going to remonstrate to death. So that's not going to happen. So I'm wondering what then is the power dynamic in the early Ming that kind of made the emperors act in this way. So on the one hand, they are trying to please the civil officials by making themselves pretty kind of civilized on the official end. But on the other hand, they are conveying all these secret messages. And it seems like Chosŏn would not have complied if there was a real threat of maybe invasion or whatever, right? So this is a counterfactual question, but what do you think would have happened if the Korean kings kind of just refused?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We usually describe the Chosŏn-Ming dynasty's relations very friendly and very kindly. But when I standed as a King Taejong's stance, when I think about the King Taejong or King Sejong, they were very threatened. Actually, when the Yongle Emperor dispatched the troops to the Annam, to the Vietnam, he promulgated an edict to Joseon, and I'm going to Vietnam, and I'm going to kill them all. So you be careful. The Taejong was very threatened at the time, so they 뭐라 그래야 되나? 그러니까 군대를 엄청나게 조직하고 국내에서 군대를 엄청나게 조직하고 군수 물자들을 잔뜩 쌓아놓는다든지 뭐 이랬다는 겁니다. 그러니까 I think the 15th century must be explained as the military era. After the collapse of Mongol Empire, in the late 14th century, their military 군비를 뭐라고 해야 돼? military 군사 긴장.
Armament, military armament, or kind of accumulating military rations for for the war.
Right. 그 군사적인 그 긴장감이 쫙 올라갔다는 거죠. Because of the Wegu, Wako, and the Mongolian Empire, the China and Joseon and Japan are also well ready for the military troops. So I think that's the reason why the Joseon dynasty was started. And we believe that King Sejong is very civilized one, but we have to remember that he sent troops to the north part, to the Hamgyong province, Pyongan province, and he invaded Jurchen several times, again and again, and he killed many people. That's because he had to be ready for the Ming Empire's Ming's invasion, because he saw that the Ming emperors invaded Annam and Mongol tribes, and also the Nurkan. They invaded the Jurchen tribes several times, and the troops of Ming troops were right behind the Yalu River and the Tuman River. So once the emperor ordered to go south, the Joseon was very trouble. Joseon will be very trouble. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah. I hope that answers fully answers Chelsea's question. And now we have Don.
That's good, Orly. I'm just kind of curious. The side note about the tribute women who were sent to China, and then some were sent back. Right? What happened to them when they got back? Do we know?
Yeah, that's interesting question. So as well, the Imperial historiker Zhang, who is the mother of the Xuande emperor, says someone whose name was Kim He says that, please be quiet, please keep silence about what you think, when you saw, and when you listened in the Forbidden City. But he didn't keep calm. He said something to the King Sejong, and the Sejongshillok wrote the Kim He's saying, and we can know thanks to Kim Hook's words, we can know what happened in the Yongle and Xuande Emperor's forbidden city. It's very interesting story. It's very fascinating story. The Yongle Emperor actually killed 300 concubines, 3,000 concubines in the forbidden city in 1420, when he started to marching to the Mongol, because some concubines blamed him. Oh, you are not powerful. So when he was upset, and he killed 3,000 concubines, women in the forbidden city, and almost all the Korean women were killed at that time. And the Xuande Emperor, he collected maybe 37 concubines from Joseon as a tribute woman, the 공녀, and more than 50 cook and singers and dancers. Some of them left behind in the forbidden city, and one of them was the nanny of the Cheonghwa Emperor, whose name was Han Geran. And he is a cousin of the 영의정 한확 in the Seo's reign. So the Han Geran, a concubine of the Xuande Emperor and a nanny of the Cheonghwa Emperor, she was very powerful at the Cheonghwa reign. So she privately sent missions to the Joseon, and he got a huge amount of briberies from Joseon dynasty.
Yeah, I wonder if that answers Don's question.
That is fine.
Thank you. So if there's any other questions, I can collect one more before we end up this formal Q&A session. So, okay, so the formal Q&A session will be over after this, but even after the recording is over, you can remain on the Zoom group and continue informal discussion. So on behalf of the Joseon History Society, I'd like to thank Donghun again for presenting his fascinating research, and I'd like to thank every participant in today's Zoom meeting for making this event live and intriguing through active participation. The recording of today's Zoom event will be accessible online in the future. We warmly encourage you to continue to send us your thoughts and ideas so that we may further tailor and develop our offerings according to the interest in sharing your research in our diverse community. We are seeking speakers for the future events. So if you are interested in sharing your up-to-date research with us, please let us know. And please keep an eye on our website for news, as well as details of our upcoming events. You may also join our mailing list. And we look forward to seeing you again in our future events. So thank you very much again. And the formal program of the CHS Zoom meeting is over now.
Thank you very much again.